Steve, you led thousands of people, and that's not an exaggeration. I mean, you have literally led like up to 30,000, people in one setting or one organization, billions and billions of dollars in revenue. So I just want to start talking about courageous leadership with you, because you made a series of really interesting moves. You started out in PepsiCo after IU and ended up with a long time in Comcast. And that's not unusual these days. People tend to move around a little bit more, but I think there's some real benefits to sticking around. But let's just talk about that, if you don't mind. Like, what is it like as a leader? How did you develop and keep developing so you could take on these bigger roles?
Well, first, Reuben, thank you for inviting me. I'm so honored to be here with you. I think it starts very early on in my life. I grew up in the housing projects of Indianapolis, Indiana. Single mother, raised 4 knucklehead boys by herself.
Wow.
She was a high school janitor for 35 years with an 8th grade education. And she challenged us that you're never competing against someone else. You're always competing against yourself, Reuben. And so and I know, when you look yourself in the mirror in every morning or each evening, you know when you've given your best. And very rarely have I looked myself in the mirror and said, Steve, that was the best you could do. You couldn't do any more. Normally, I find a way through reflection that I could be better. And so that sets you on a journey, not so much setting a big goal out there for yourself, but you set a journey for yourself that every day I want to be better than yesterday.
Right.
And you challenge yourself to live a life almost as a learning lab, almost as a life of challenge and focus. And that's what allowed me to go from the housing projects of Indianapolis to Indiana University as a first-generation college kid, to my first job selling hospital supplies for a little company called American Hospital Supply in the Northeast, to ultimately become the president of Comcast West, where it was almost $19 billion in revenue, leading 30,000 employees across 13 states. So when people say, Steve, tell me about your life, I say, compete against yourself. You will never find a day where you're bored. You will always find a way to challenge yourself and find ways to improve.
I love your story. I I mean, it seems like the margins in your early life, and maybe the margins throughout your career, especially the higher up you go, the margins are pretty thin, right? You've got to win, and the margins are pretty thin. Did having limited resources growing up, did that develop in you a sense of creativity, grit? Like, what came out of that experience that
Hunger, Reuben.
Yeah.
Let's think about this, Reuben. In your lifetime and in my lifetime, there are only a handful of decisions that we make that truly matter. Because none of us are going to go through this life without making mistakes. So I've certainly made my share of mistakes. But when you can get the big decisions right, that sets you on a path forward, Reuben. And so I just remember learning early on that I was not going to be a victim. While my circumstances might be different than yours, while you might have more, I'm not going to utilize that as an excuse for lack of success. I'm going to turn that into an opportunity. Right. And so hunger is the word that I look for, that I share, that really push me forward. And then when you couple that with competing against yourself, you take God-given talent, you know that you can do more. That's where you start making a difference. So when you can get the big decisions right, and for me, one of those big decisions, how I came about it, I have no idea. I'm sure my mom had a lot to do with it. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not going to allow my circumstances or my environment dictate my path forward.
The words that come up for me as you're talking, Steve, is extreme ownership. You just took extreme ownership of your life. Is that a fair statement?
Personal responsibility is critical to success. Now, we all know, Reuben, we go into this, life is not always fair. Everything's not going to work out exactly the way you planned it.
Right.
So how do you get comfortable navigating uncertainty, preparing yourself that I own me? For example, Reuben, I'll share this with you. People often say, Steve, what is it like working for Comcast? I said, no, wait a minute, you got it wrong. I am chairman and CEO of Steve White Incorporated.
Right.
Comcast purchases my services, and I'm so excited about that, Reuben. But when you now have in your mind that you're the owner of your own company,
right?
Every investment you make is to make your company stronger. That develops the mentality of personal responsibility, personal ownership. And so therefore, the success of your company is tied to your activity, your behavior. Now, let's be honest. We all need help along the way. We need people giving us a hand up, not a handout. But when you own you don't give that power away. That creates a life of personal responsibility, accountability, and ownership, which is what I believe is critical for success, whether you grew up poor or you grew up rich. And I don't think it matters. Personal ownership, accountability is critical to success.
What is your relationship at all to self-pity? Does it ever come up for you? Do you ever have a moment or a second where you catch yourself in any form of self-pity and you have to snap out of it?
Absolutely, Reuben. We all have those bad days. We all feel bad. We all get punched in the stomach. But here are two ways to help me. Number one, I have a phrase called road dog relationships. Now, where I grew up, the definition of a road dog, a fight breaks out, Reuben. Your road dog jumps in, helps you figure out the fight, and they ask questions after the fight. A non-road dog said, now, why are we in this fight? What's going on? Do I really want to get in it? Now, I'm not promoting fighting, but I'm more sharing a story. So when you can have road dog relationships, these are men and women that are invested in your dreams.
Right.
They inspire you. They affirm you. Now, they don't make it easy for you. They ask you tough questions. So when you feel sorry for yourself, that's when you rely on those road dog relationships to help you readjust or reorient your thinking. That's number one. Number two, Reuben, and this is really, really critical. Daily reflection. For me, early morning is my reflection time. That's when you get to think about your day, think about yesterday, you think about your upcoming day, and you catch yourself feeling sorry for yourself. And that's when you can dust yourself off, because what happens if you're not careful, you can fall down a deep hole and you can stay there for long periods of time, which makes it harder to get out. So this daily reflection, daily inspiration, daily affirmation that I am on the right track or I need to adjust is critical. Road dog relationships, daily reflection allow me to dust myself off when I'm feeling sorry for myself, because it happens to everybody. None of us are perfect. It will happen. But if you have those right relationships and you have daily reflection, I believe you have a good chance to dust yourself off and find your way again.
What does it look like to have grace towards oneself? In the sense that you said, okay, I didn't live up to, maybe I could have pushed myself a little bit harder. You know, how does it not turn into like this perfectionism where you end up judging yourself and you're always living from the deficit?
Great question. Because it's a new day. Colin Powell would always say, no matter what the day looked like or felt like or played out, the sun will come out tomorrow. So short of death, there's no reason to believe you can't bounce back. Right. Now, this is not about living life with rose-colored glasses. Yeah, you have to face reality.
Yeah.
But guess what? If you're still breathing, if you're still walking, if you can still run, you can still get up, you're healthy, what's the excuse? What's the reason for not dusting yourself off and get back up? Most successful people have had a painful set of circumstances. Right. Let me just give you an example. Early on in my career, Reuben, I was a young sales manager, the youngest sales manager in American Hospital Supply's history. I was 23 years old. I was leading my own team. I was on my way. I got fired 12 months into the job because I was not leading my team. I was not caring for my team. I had made it about me. The team was not growing, and I got fired. And I was devastated. But someone reached over and said, Steve, I see more in you than you see in yourself. I dusted myself off, and it was the greatest lesson that could have ever happened to me, getting fired early on in my career. So we will have those moments. The key is, how do you respond to it?
I love that, because you got to have that taste and you got to make some course corrections early in your career, right? So it wasn't when you hit that level. And do you think that set you up for some of your meteoric rise? Because it seems like you were doubling in responsibility nearly all the time. So
absolutely. When you have failure, Reuben, there's good fear and bad fear. Bad people say, well, what does that mean? Bad fear is you and I see a bear in the woods. Bad fear is you're paralyzed. You don't do anything, the bear eats you.
Right.
Good fear says, danger, danger, let me take action into my own hands, whether it's run, get up a tree, fight the bear, do whatever. And so when you taste a little bit of danger and failure, it fuels you to say, I never want to go back there again. And so that's why this personal responsibility, personal accountability is so critical, because I could have easily said, wait a minute, this is unfair that I'm getting fired. I'm a young sales manager. I'm barely a year into the job. I haven't been given a shot for success. I could have easily played victim, and a lot of people would have supported that, Reuben.
Sure.
But I took personal responsibility, and that served as fuel. Now, there have been other mistakes too, but that was one of those life-changing mistakes that I'm so glad happened to me. And in my case, early in my career, so I had plenty of time to rebound.
Plenty of time to rebound, plenty of time to learn the lesson, and then you could move faster, maybe even some of your peers, right? That extreme responsibility and keep tinkering. I love that. When you're head of a $19 billion division and 30,000+ people, what were some of the highest moments? What were some of the scarier moments that you had?
Well, some of the highest moments, I'll give you an example. I just recently, when I left that job, I'm now serving as president, special counsel, supporting our CEO. I was president of the West Division for 11 years. One of my proudest moments, Reuben, one of the gentlemen that worked for me for almost 11 years was my replacement.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So when you can develop the next generation of leaders that follow you,
right,
that is one special moment. Because, see, Reuben, no one will remember that we grew cash flow by X%. No one will remember that we grew subscribers X amount. No one will remember our customer experience scores. They might. People like me might. But what people remember is how you treated people.
Right.
They felt when they work with you. So when people can see that we were the largest exporter of talent within Comcast, when they could see homegrown leaders getting to the position of president, that sends a very positive message. And that was probably my greatest joy and experience, was to see all of these leaders that went on to do greater things. And certainly, some of my most difficult moments was when, we didn't hit our numbers, not because Comcast was going to go poor. I view my job, Reuben, as every one of my employees, 30,000 employees, 85% of them are frontline hourly people.
Right.
Is I wanted to ensure that their W-2 grew every year. Right. One of my old employees said, Steve, you've got two jobs: respect your employees, and number two, ensure my W-2 grows every year. Because they have families, they're trying to send their kids to college, they're trying to retire. And so my job is to put them in a position of success. And 1 year we didn't do that, and their W-2 did not grow because they didn't earn their bonuses. And again, that was one of those failures that fueled me to ensure that never ever happened again to them.
How do you leave your door open, Steve, to receive bad news? Because, look, if I'm a frontline employee and I bump into you at some point, right, it must have taken some courage to get out of my car and give you bad news. Is that a fair statement? If I'm that
very fair, but one of the things that you have to do, Reuben, you have to create the environment for it to happen. For example, every year I would do anywhere from 85 to 100 focus groups with employees throughout the organization, 10 to 12 in a group, so everybody felt comfortable, and we talked about the business. And so when you start to develop a relationship where you now are having 85 to 100 conversations where you're saying it's a safe room, maybe the first time people aren't comfortable, maybe the second time. But come on, Reuben, by the 50th conversation, the word starts to get around that it's okay to go in there and say what's on your mind.
Right.
And so when you start to now walk the right behavior, and then your team role models that behavior, it creates an organization that is open to sharing. But you have to put yourself out there on a regular basis. And then once you're in that room, Reuben, you have to be vulnerable. And I share openly, just like I'm sharing with you, I share openly with my team the mistakes that I've made. And when you're vulnerable, it says this is a safe room. And now I can share openly and with great confidence that the messenger will not be shot. Now, that's what you have to do. And that's how you build trust in an organization. You can't tell people to come be honest with you. You have to demonstrate that it is okay to share bad news. And you do that by walking the right behavior.
You know, cultural empowerment goes both ways, right? On the one hand, you want to be open to receiving that type of feedback. When do you as a leader push back on individuals and say, okay, well, what would you do? Or what solution do you bring to the table? When and where should a leader push back and instill some empowerment in ways?
Yeah, and I learned this from my mother because she did not run a democratic household. I don't know about you, Reuben. There was one boss and there was one sheriff. And here's what I mean. You cannot delegate leadership. So as the leader of West Division, I decided if we were going to Miami or North Dakota or California. See, as a leader, you can't delegate that responsibility.
Yeah.
But how we get there, that's open for discussion. So now I can keep an open dialogue. But I'm not going to sit here and debate with you whether we're going to Miami because that's ultimately my responsibility as the leader. Now I can seek input, right?
Yeah.
But I can't delegate that. So when I push back is when I feel that this decision is squarely within the responsibility of the top leader, the CEO of this enterprise. That's where I'll push back and say, I appreciate your perspective, but I've gotten enough feedback and we're going to Miami. We've made a strategic decision.
Okay.
Now, you get to help me decide how we get there. Do we ride a bus? Do we drive? Do we hitchhike? Do we take a train? Let's talk about how we get to Miami. But I own that decision. And that's how I believe you push back appropriately when it fits squarely within the realm of the CEO or the top decision maker.
I love where you're going that. It's like strategic control, but tactical flexibility, right?
That's exactly right.
Right. Okay. I'm with you. Right. Yeah.
And part of the reason doing those focus groups is you're seeking input on whether you go to Miami or not. Because through those conversations, you might say, I was thinking we should go to Miami, but based on all this feedback, we're going to go to North Dakota or we're going to go to New Orleans. So you allow the organization to help you shape strategy. But at the end of the day, you have to make the decision. Hopefully you get input along the way. And that's how I try to balance where I can delegate and where I can push back and where I allow the organization to kind of talk it out to help us figure out the right direction.
I think you're at an intersection that's really interesting in the sense that you have a tremendous amount of revenue experience, right? You've driven billions of dollars in revenue. You have a personal philosophy of no victimhood, right? I'm not a victim, but I am 100% responsible. And now you're tasked and playing a big role in the organization of thinking through DE&I, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's an interesting mix, an interesting intersection. So how do you have these type of sensitive conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and yet not maybe switch into a victim mentality or what, you know, am I asking the right question correctly? It's just an interesting place to be see that. Yeah.
So let's talk about D&I. Let's talk about the representation portion, right?
Yeah.
Let's just talk about that. Everybody wants to win. And so when you can demonstrate to your team that the teams that win have the broadest perspective,
right,
with the most perspectives sitting at the table. Can we all agree that if we all grew up on Elm Street, going to the same school, the chances of us thinking similar are probably pretty high?
Oh, sure. Right. Yeah.
You get the answer yes. But what if we brought in people from Rose Street, and, Pelican Street. And now we get all of those different perspectives in a room, and we're fighting over ideas, not turf. And then you can demonstrate how the best ideas are being discussed. And now you're trying to figure out what's the right way to go. And we all get to participate in that.
Right.
And now you can start clearly connecting that to winning in the marketplace, which then means your own personal goals get taken care of, whether it's taking care of your family, growing your career, whatever your individual goals are for your company. Now that can start to happen. But that's a huge part of showing people how success happens. And then you start exposing your team to different companies that are doing it the right way, and you see their success.
Right.
Because success is never about strategy. It's never about the financial results. It is about the team that is most connected to a common vision,
right,
with most perspective sitting around the table. Those are the companies that win. And the more and more you can share that and expose your team and your employees to that, the more they'll buy in. And then once they start winning, it just kind of becomes one of those things that just kind of catches fire and you're on your way.
I love where you're going at. It sounds like a strong emphasis on like cognitive diversity. Hey, we need as many people in the room as possible. And it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you want to give everyone equal opportunity to have a shot, right? But the outcome is the outcome. That's an individual and the price they're willing to pay and how far they're willing to go. But it sounds like you want to create a playing field where everyone at least has a shot at the idea or the promotion or the opportunity. Is that fair? Is that
Absolutely. And then think about this, Reuben. How can I be successful?
Yeah.
If I carve out X% of the population, if I say, you know what, I'm going to carve out 25%, or I'm going to carve out 10%, I'm going to carve out 5%.
Yeah.
You're essentially going into a fight and saying, I'm going to put one arm behind my back and I'm going to go into this battle. No one would say, go do that.
No.
But you've got to do it, and you got to do it in a way where everyone feels like they have a seat at the table. Because my purpose at the end of the day, Reuben, is to create a table of prosperity where everyone can sit.
Prosperity.
And to show people that, show them the more we all bring to that table. We're not socialists, we're capitalists.
That's right.
But to show people the more we can bring those thoughts to the table, we all win here. Together,
that's right,
we win. And that's the beauty of a public company, because we have one currency. In our case, it's Comcast stock.
Yeah.
We have one currency. I don't get paid any differently than you do. We have one currency, and it's called Comcast stock. And the more Comcast is successful, the more that stock goes up, the more all of us can sit at that table of prosperity. And then if you can do that with purpose,
right,
that is a magical connection.
Do people ever come up to you in your organization and say, hey, you're a role model for me? Seeing you and seeing your involvement in the things you've done instills confidence in me and the things I can do. Has that ever, those type of conversations?
Absolutely. But Reuben, they don't always say it in words. They say if they follow you.
Oh, interesting.
See, you can't be a leader if no one follows you.
Right.
So the fact that I'm following you says I respect you, that I like the way you do things.
Right.
You are a role model. So as a result, even when I might disagree with you, I'm going to follow you. See, words are one thing. They're important, but actions mean another.
Right.
So for example, at Comcast, we had something called the power rankings, where the company would rank every region, every part of the company on the power rankings across 35 key metrics. The West Division was number one for 10 years in a row. Yeah. And multiply 10 years times 12 months a year, and that gives you an idea. We were number one for 200 plus months in a row. You don't do that unless men and women believe in you and they're ready to follow you. And here's how you know as a leader, when people start giving you discretionary effort. See, employees can work every day, work 8 to 5 and be fine. But when you start catching employees stopping by a retail store on a Saturday because they're in the neighborhood and they just want to see how things are going, or you pull up in the parking lot and you see people there at 6:37 in the morning because they want to get a head start on the week, Or when you go home at night, you see 4 or 5 people in a conference room brainstorming about ideas. That's discretionary effort.
I love it.
That's when you know you have an organization that is ready to go to the next level of performance.
Did your mom get to see some of your successes? Did she get to experience?
She's still around.
Oh,
she's 81
right.
years old. She'll be 82 in October, Reuben. And every time she visits us, she cries. As you know, I just wrote my first book. It was released in March. It's called Uncompromising. And my hope is your listeners will go out and find the book. If not, go to my website, stevewhitespeaks.com. You can pull up excerpts of the book. You'll see my mom is prominently discussed and mentioned in the book because that foundation was laid when I was 9, 10, and 11 years old. And you might say, how did she do that? I'll give you one example, and this is the power of role modeling. My mother, when she decided to leave my father, because she made the tough decision that her purpose in life was to ensure her 4 boys had a better life, and that our current course was not going to give us that. She left the marriage while she had a marriage license, Reuben. She didn't even have her driver's license. Her first job was cleaning motel rooms. Now, that's motel with an M, not hotel with an H where there's a spa and in-room dining. This is bare knuckle. And on the weekend, she would take her 4 little boys to help clean those motel rooms. And so she was role modeling for us the necessary behavior. Now, while her skill set were far greater than a motel maid, because there's nothing wrong with that, but she made the decision she was going to do whatever she had to do to ensure that her boys had a better life.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about my mom in the book, she gets teary-eyed. Because when you live your purpose and you see it come to fruition, what better way to live?
What a legacy. What a legacy.
What a legacy.
Amazing. That's such a gift to have that. What a gift for your mom to see this in your life and probably in your brother's life. And
Reuben, I'll share this quote with you. There's a quote that goes, we all die twice in life. We die the day they put us in our grave. The second time is the last time somebody mentions our name.
Yeah.
And I can promise you, long after my mother's gone, I will still be mentioning her name. And my hope is that my son will do the same thing. My hope is the men and women I've worked with Comcast, long after I'm gone, they will still share stories. They will talk about our time together. That's legacy.
That's legacy. I love that. That's such a privilege. Final words of wisdom, Steve, is around a lot of leaders right now feeling disempowered. It's one shock after another. There might even be more shocks, right? We may not be done with the shocks yet. They're feeling disempowered. There's a sense of hopelessness among some. What would you say to those folks out there with regards to how to show up at work, how to still win these type of times, and what would be your word of advice for
what a great question, Reuben, and I'll share this with you. Mark Twain had a quote: the 2 most important days in your life is the day you're born. The second is when you know why.
Yeah.
Find out why you've been placed on this earth. What is your purpose? What is your fight? Live it. Yeah. And no matter what happens around you, if you can look yourself in the mirror every morning, every night, knowing that you're living your purpose, your reason for being on this earth, I promise you, all the uncertainty does not matter because you know that you're living your truth.
Yeah.
And in my case, my truth is, how do I create a table of prosperity for as many people as possible? Because you don't grow up the way I did, and you reach the highest levels of corporate America unless a lot of people are giving you a hand up, not a handout, but a hand up.
Right.
And so what better way for me to pay it back than to create the same opportunity for others? That's my purpose. So no matter what happens, whether it's pandemic or politics, doesn't matter. If I'm living my purpose and I'm living my truth, there's nothing that will discourage you from going forward.